You put it here and then I took it somewhere else. Do you see? Yeah, I can use that one. All right. We're back in Revelation chapter 20 this morning. Revelation chapter 20. And we went through the first 6 verses pretty much of Revelation chapter 20 last time. There is at least one piece of that I want us to at least spend a couple minutes thinking about again before we move on. So again, we've seen from chapter 12 on, focus on the enemies facing God's people, what they're doing, what's going on. We've seen how Satan is behind this. He's using one beast that represents the empire as kind of the method, the avenue in which Satan is working this particular attack on God's people. And then a second beast that's working through that empire, through that first beast, to bring a false religion that's also behind this attack on God's people. God has rendered judgment against them. We saw that in chapters 17, 18, 19. And at the end of 19, the 2 beasts were thrown in the lake of fire. And now he's dealing with Satan, the dragon, here in chapter 20. And one of the things that we talk about is how the angel took a chain, he bound Satan, and in verse 3 of chapter 20, threw him into the abyss, shut it and sealed it over him so that he would not deceive the nations any longer until the 1,000 years were completed. So at least I suggested last time that what that means, because we all know, and Dale made an excellent point about Satan's still working today. He still deceives people today. So what is this? Since this is dealing with what those Christians were facing, what is it talking about? And at least what I suggested is that it is specifically dealing with the situation, but it's the specific way that Satan was deceiving and attacking the Christians then. That specific type of deception. And what I want to revisit for just a couple minutes is looking at some of the past verses that we've seen in Revelation. What's interesting to me is that the word for nations is only used about 5 times in the first 11 chapters. And it's used, I didn't get the exact count, but it's about 15 times or so in chapters 12 through the end of the book. So there's an emphasis on this idea of what is happening to the nations. And the same is true of the word deceive. Deceive is only used twice in chapters 1 through 11, and it's used, I think it was about 8 times in this last half of the book. So it's really focusing, and a lot of times they're tied together, deceiving the nations. So I think the second half of the book is painting the picture, and that's kind of the sum of how Satan is working. If you go all the way back to chapter 12, when we're first introduced to Satan as the dragon, in verse 9 it says, "The great dragon was thrown down, the serpent of old, who is called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth." Now at that point it hasn't gotten into the specific situation that the Christians were dealing with. When we looked at chapter 12, we said that first part of the vision was really talking about Satan's attack on Jesus during his birth and his death, and then Jesus overcame when he resurrected and he ascended into heaven. So when it introduces us to Satan here, it says he deceives the world. Notice it's a different word. It's not he deceives the nations, he deceives the world. It's a different word there, talking about the entire inhabited world. But if you say, okay, well, if you've got the nations and the world, are we really talking about something different? Maybe, maybe not. But it does use a different word there. when it's talking about Satan, what does Satan do? And you kind of look and see how the word world is used through the New Testament. And it's kind of focus on a generality of here's the world, here's what the world does, and don't be like the world. And so I think this is also a general statement about what Satan does. He deceives the world, and Satan is still deceiving the world today. He hasn't been stopped or bound from completely deceiving the world. But I want you to look now at some specific language as we start getting into the beasts, what these Christians are dealing with. In Revelation 13 and verse 7, the beast, it was given to him to make war with the saints and to overcome them, and authority over every tribe and people and tongue and nation was given to him. And then in chapter 13 and verse 14, and he deceives those who dwell on the earth because of the signs which was given to him, talking about the work of the second beast. And then in chapter 14 and verse 8, talking about referring to the empire as Babylon here, another angel, a second one, followed, saying, "Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great, she who has made all the nations drink of the wine of the passion of her immorality." Chapter 15 in verse 4, "Who will not fear, O Lord, and glorify your name? For you alone are holy, for all the nations will come and worship before you, for your righteous acts have been revealed." We'll look at a few more verses, but I want you to notice the emphasis going on in this section of Revelation. It's kind of a contrast. The nations should be coming to the Lord, and he says in chapter 15, they will come to the Lord, but right now in this situation, Satan is working through these beasts to deceive the nations, and they're all worshiping him instead. And so it's this specific picture of how Satan is working through a world power to basically control the world and kind of direct the world on through this specific nation, specific false religion. Chapter 16 and verse 19, the great city was split into three parts. So the city is painted as the source of this suffering for the Christians. But when the city falls in chapter 16 and verse 19, the cities of the nations fell. Remember how it talks about they basically put all their eggs in this basket of this empire, of this kingdom. This is where we get our money. This is where we get our power. Oh, this is great. We're going to get everything from this kingdom. And then the source of that kingdom, the capital, falls, the great city. And all the cities of the nations start to crumble too, because they have put their focus on this nation. The harlot in chapter 17 and verse 15, where the harlot sits are peoples and multitude and nations and tongues. Chapter 18 verse 3, all the nations have drunk of the wine of the passion of her immorality. Chapter 18 and verse 23, because all the nations were deceived by your sorcery, talking about the harlot. And so we come back to chapter 20. And so after all of this language about here's what Satan's doing. He's working through these beasts and he's deceiving the nations. He's deceiving the nations. He got them all believing in this. And God judges this situation. He deals with the beasts. And now he says, what I believe he's saying in chapter 20 is, and I'm not going to let Satan do this for the 1,000 years. I'm going to stop him from being able to do this again for whatever the 1,000 years represent. So I just wanted to give a little more context there to why I said, at least that's my understanding in chapter 20 of what is going on with the binding of Satan. God is saying, I'm not going to let him do this exact type of attack again for a while. Any questions, comments, thoughts about that? Laura? Right.
So let's fight against the saints.
Yeah, as soon as he gets that chance, and we're going to look at this section in detail in a second, but as soon as he gets the chance, he wants to go right back to this type of attack that he's been banned from being able to do. What other thoughts? And thoughts that point a different direction, perfectly fine. That's what this Bible class is for us to be able to kind of think about it together on what God is trying to tell us here. Joe?
That while he's deceiving, at the exact same time, the saints, the martyrs, are judging.
Right.
So today, the saints are judging.
Yes. Yeah, they have been, they're on the thrones, they're judging those who have gone down that path. Anything else before we move on?
I mean, even though the terminology sounds deceiving the nations, deceiving, it's this broad, sweeping language.
Yeah.
But we've got to remember, they all weren't deceived.
Right.
Because they're saints.
Yes.
Through all of this.
Right.
So, yes, there was a great impact, a great influence. Satan's influence was enormous, and God allowed it for a while. But I think it is important to find the good,
Absolutely.
positive, even in this dark picture, is there were still some that managed not to be deceived.
Right.
And
Even
God-
when they had
even when-
cut their head off
Yes.
because of this.
So I think that's an important part to bring forth in this kind of dark picture, is that, if we truly do lean on God,
Right. Yeah.
despite, it sounds like that, would anybody manage to escape, the deception of Satan? Because it sounds enormous.
Right.
And the answer would be yes.
Yeah. Can you, sometimes we look at these kind of, it seems, far out there situations. If someone has the gun to my head, says, do you believe Jesus is the Son of God? I don't know what I would do in that situation. But I think what I can say is I know that people have had the gun, the sword to their head, and they stayed faithful to Jesus. They held on to that hope. And okay, take my head, but you can't take my spirit. You can't take me. Jesus said, no one can snatch you out of my hand. So it's a powerful encouragement to us as we can stand on our faith in the face of great trial. Well, let's look in chapter 20, beginning in verse 7. When the 1,000 years are completed, Satan will be released from his prison and will come out to deceive the nations which are in the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together for the war. The number of them is like the sand of the seashore. And they came up on the broad plain of the earth and surrounded the camp of the saints in the beloved city. And fire came down from heaven and devoured them. And the devil who deceived them was thrown into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are also. And they will be tormented day and night forever and ever. So Christians, you faced this difficulty, this situation that Satan has wielded on the earth. I have rendered my judgment, and now I'm not going to let him do that for 1,000 years. This kind of symbolic language we've seen other places for a while. I'm going to keep him from doing that. It's not literally about 1,000 years, as with the other numbers. It's about whatever time I see fit, I'm not going to let him do this anymore. But then when you get to verse 7, what does this also tell us? What is God revealing to us in verses 7 and 8?
He still can do what he's going to do. If God doesn't limit him to certain things, until the judgment, Satan is going to still be Satan.
Right. And we saw that back in chapter 12. He was in heaven, that whole scene trying to attack the child. He was thrown down, and all that did was just make him angry, and he started looking for other ways to start working. And it makes me think, yeah, okay, he's been bound, but he's still a roaring lion walking about the earth seeking whom he may devour. He just can't do this right now. Peggy?
On a more earthly level, as an example, you hear about people who are very powerful, evil people that do end up going to prison.
Yeah,
Satan being around. There are still people that want to do evil and still want to serve him and not serve God.
that's right. Yeah. And, yeah, just to your point, God is very much at work in the world just as Satan is. And that's one of the important things for us to recognize. Vaughn?
Okay. Where we left off last week, that's 1,000 years.
Mm-hmm.
You know, verse 7, when 1,000 years was completed, how that sometimes he's teaching and he comes back. Like that would that be fitting to start after, like verse 7, start after verse 3?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, now, see, now.
Say that. I didn't quite follow.
Verse
Well-
7 follows verse 3.
Right. Yes.
And then verse 4 down, talking about the reign of Christ and the resurrection.
Yeah. It's almost like 4 through 6 is like in a parentheses.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I'm telling you what's happening to Satan, and he picks back up in 7 about what Satan is doing. And 4 through 6 says, and because God judged Satan and bound him, and now the Christians see that, verses 4 through 6, now they also see the Christians who died in a different light. Before we thought, sad them, they suffered at the hands of these evil people. Now we can think, how wonderful for them. They were faithful to the end. They're on thrones. They're living. They're not dead.
So
Yeah.
there's a lot more going on in heaven
Right.
than we could
Right.
give credit to in that 1,000 years.
And that's the important thing for us to remember about death, right? It feels so like that's it. The person's gone. No, they're alive, and if they're a Christian, they're reigning with Jesus, and and judging and saying, live faithful like me or else.
Now in creating justice.
Yeah.
Really uplifting.
Yeah.
I just say Hebrews 12, 1 and 2.
Yeah.
He says we are surrounded
That's right.
by this cloud of witnesses. Well, where are they? That's
Yeah.
those that.
Those who have gone
and they are-
before us.
and
Yeah.
They're there for our example, for our admonition.
Right.
So we need to think positive. Sometimes instead of doing about things that are sad,
That's right.
such as death.
That's right. Can lose someone, but I can be thankful for how God worked through their life and what they mean to me now. So for some period, Satan's not going to be able to do this, but at least if that's the correct understanding of what's going on here, verse 7 also means there is coming a time where God will allow Satan to work this way again. And you think about it, there has never been a time since the Roman Empire, there has never been a time where a world power wielded as much authority and influence and might that they did over the earth that has forced people, tried to anyways, to serve other gods. And I believe what he's saying is before the end comes, it will happen again. Or at least Satan's going to try to make it happen again.
I think that's right. I think it's happened multiple times and in different ways, and it affects different people. But some of us were talking after class last time. Look at the people in the African countries. I don't know if you listen to the news or not, but in almost every village where there are a group of people that claim to be Christians, you have people that are against them. That come through and just kill and slaughter and take prisoners and stuff. That happens every day.
Right,
We just don't hear about it.
right,
And you go back years before, there were other countries. South America, it was happening down there in different
Right.
ways. You look at the Dark Ages, way back when, boy, if you didn't agree with these people's interpretation of what religion was, they'd kill you, burn you at the stake, take all your stuff, didn't matter.
sure.
So, yeah, I agree. Satan, until the end, there's going to be this almost like a recurring loop of things that happen.
Right,
And that's why, we look at this, we learn from what they went through, and
Yeah. And you know, but there's still a difference between those situations that we hear about today and what was going on here. Think about that. Do you remember the letter that we had up on the board from the Governor Pliny to the Emperor Trajan? Since that time, there's been leaders of different nations that try to put a stop to Christianity. But I mean, you think about this. This is one governor, which I imagine there were many letters like this between the emperor and his governors. Here's the emperor of the world. I mean, all the kings of the world answered to him. And he's basically saying, yeah, if you find them and this is the situation you find, yeah, take care of them. That's it. That's pretty, I can't imagine living in that circumstance. Gil?
I think it's important to keep in mind, too, that all of the powers of Satan are not addressed in darkness that we see so readily.
Yeah.
Some of it comes cloaked in what people perceive to be Christianity.
Yeah, absolutely. And there was times, and I think maybe even allusions to this, and temptations for the Christians that God was addressing during this time. He talked about, maybe it was chapter 14, about don't compromise. And I think Christians were probably looking for ways, well, you know, maybe I can say the emperor is a god. You know, I can stand here right now and come up with some way to say, well, God put the human institutions in place. And so if the emperor's in charge, maybe he won't have a problem if I go ahead and worship the emperor as a god because he put him in place. So maybe it's not that big a deal. And now I can feel a little bit better about lighting some incense to the emperor so that I can go buy groceries. But there's all kinds of ways throughout time that people have tried to weasel things into Christianity. And sometimes even Christianity as a larger group has said, yeah, this is the right way to go, and it's not. It's not God's way, and we have to be real careful of that. So, Satan is going to be released. He's going to come out, as Laura pointed out. First thing he comes to do is when he's not bound from this anymore, first thing he comes to do, I'm going to deceive the nations, four corners of the earth again. And then you have this two names mentioned, Gog and Magog. And I know, maybe some of you have some cousins named Gog and Magog. It's not who he's talking about. Who is Gog and Magog? Russia. Yeah. If you look at, there's some people that try to play with some of the original words, and they do say, this is Russia.
Ezekiel talked about it.
Okay. And we mentioned that before. So Revelation 19 through the end parallels Ezekiel 36 through 48. Same thoughts in those chapters. And just like the rest of Revelation, a lot of it's taken from the Old Testament. And so in Ezekiel 38 and 39, you see this vision of Gog and Magog as enemies, and God's making a promise that he's going to destroy them at that time. But this still isn't the first time these names have come up. Do you know the first time the names have come up? Genesis.
These are archetypes.
Yeah.
Enemies of God's people.
Yeah, that's right. If you go back to, you can start flipping to Genesis. Let me pull up my note here. I lost the exact place. And if someone knows it, just yell it out. Look in Genesis chapter 10. So the flood, remember, God destroyed everybody. It got wicked. God cast his judgment. He destroyed the world. Chapter 9 is when the flood recedes and Noah goes out from the ark and they start populating the world. And so we have this genealogy of the nations that came out from Noah. And starting in Genesis 10 and verse 1, these are the records of the generation of Shem, Ham, and Japheth, the sons of Noah, and the sons were born to them after the flood. The the sons of Japheth were Gomer and Magog. And then he goes on to list several others. So this is kind of, you see different variations of names throughout scriptures depending on the time, how names kind of change, how they refer to it. But Gomer and Magog. What's the very next thing that happens in scripture after you get this genealogy? The Tower of Babel. Tell me about it. What happened?
And has tremendous pride.
Okay.
He wants to reach up to heaven.
Yeah.
And exalt himself up to heaven by what he builds himself.
Okay.
And God comes down and divides
Right.
by language.
Right. So you have these kind of first people mentioned as the types of all these people that came out. And what did they do? What did Gomer and Magog and all the rest of them do? They got proud. They started lifting themselves up again. They started deciding, this is what I'm going to do. And even in the name of, I think it kind of pictures it, even in the name of God. You know, we're going to build this tower to heaven. And God said, that's not what I told you to do. It's not what I told Adam and Eve to do. That's not what I told Noah to do when they got out of the ark. I told them to go, be fruitful, multiply the earth, and do my will. And they said, no, we're going to build this tower. We like this idea better. And so it's this same story, same thing of what we saw in the book of Revelation. I'm going to decide what's going to happen. I'm going to decide what's right and wrong. I'm going to decide where power should sit and how all of this should work. And what happened at the Tower of Babel, God said, no, you won't. I'll decide what you're going to do. And he scattered their languages and scattered them through the earth and said, you're going to do my will.
It almost sounds like it's going to be a special, like kind of like this event. This event's going to be something that's going to be a little different than all of the, just like what Sam was saying. It happens, and it's still happening, but
Right.
am I wrong? Because I don't, it just seems that way when I read it, like this is going
Yeah.
to be a special event.
Yeah. I mean, it's you've got the flood, which was kind of like this. The world before the flood. Now, right after the flood, it's like happening again. So you got this big event at the Tower of Babel where things change. And then it seems like it started happening again with Babylon. And you saw what had to happen to Nebuchadnezzar there. And then there was the prophecies during the time of Babylon of what's going to happen in Rome. And guess what? It followed exactly what God said. The world started coming like this. And even, there's an interesting piece to this, and I think somebody brought this up last time. When it talks about the time in history that Jesus would come into the world, how does God describe it? The fullness of times. Well, when was that? Right before this time we're talking about of just massive wickedness and pride of this kingdom. And the interesting thing about that, and Terrell mentioned looking for the good in it, here's the world building these roads, making Greek the universal language. Shipping has never been like it's been before. And they're thinking, look at us, look at all that what we can do. And God says, the fullness of time, and now I'm going to bring my son, and it's the perfect time for me to start sending the gospel into the world. Because there's never been a time where language and travel and business has been built such a way that makes it so easy for my message to go out into the world. So here's man's pride, and God said, first I'm going to take your pride and use it for my glory, and then I'm going to judge it. And so when you look out and see the pride and evil and wickedness in the world, just remember that God is on his throne and he'll find ways to use those things for his glory. Doesn't mean he's lost control. It just means man keeps doing the things that he thinks he's doing. And God says, and I'm still in control of it all. Yeah.
It said that, here in chapter 20, he gathers them all together. Okay, so he's taking the scattered and bringing them all together. And that's the same mindset that was in the Tower of Babel, because it says that.
Yes.
He says, so we will not be scattered.
Right.
So they had the tower as the gathering point to keep us connected, to keep us here and powerful. And this is kind of the flip side. Satan's been away,
Right.
He's released, and so what he's going to do, he's going to, in one way, build his own Tower of Babel.
Right.
He's going to, these people that are scattered, he's bringing them all together, but he's bringing them together for a specific purpose. And again, his purpose is to do damage against God's people. But what we see is even though Satan has his purposes, and God allows him to act, but God brings, and I guess I could say the wisdom in it, but God allows him to bring all the people together, and guess what God does? Well, that's great. You've gathered all these people together, so I'm just going to rain fire from heaven down and attack everybody.
Right.
Consume you all in
Right.
one spot, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it's lovely to kind of see that, where,
Right.
where it looks like somebody's winning, getting the advantage, but we who are believers know that God allows it
Yeah.
for a purpose,
Right.
and often it's to suit his purpose.
Yes. Yeah. Amen to that. So, there are, I think, two really important lessons that we learn. Number one, this is going to happen, and so what should we take from that? Were all the Christians ready when this happened? And what have we learned in Revelation? As Terrell pointed, there were some that were ready, but not all of them were ready. And God encouraged some, and hopefully some listened to Revelation, and they turned from compromising, and they were faithful, but not all of them did. Some of them gave in. And so the first lesson is we need to be ready. Is the 1,000 years over now? I don't know. I don't know if it's going to happen in my lifetime or my kids' lifetime, but I need to be ready. And I need to prepare my children to be ready that something like this is coming. But what's and Terrell was getting to this, the second point, when you look at verses 9 and 10, even when it does happen, what do I know for certain?
God's going to win.
God's going to win. He's going to win. His people are going to come out on top like they always have, even if they die. Isn't that what Jesus said? Even if they die, my people shall live. And here's what the message of Revelation, even if you die, you're going to come out on top. Because Jesus always comes out on top. And ultimately, the devil is going to be thrown in where the beasts are. Tormented day and night, forever and ever. Notice verse 9, the language. Where are the Christians?
Surrounded by the enemy.
Yeah, they're surrounded by the enemy. How does it describe the Christian situation? It gives two kind of descriptions. The camp and the city. When you hear the camp, you thinking biblically, what does that take you to? Yeah, they're camped for war. Also makes me think when they're going through camp throughout the wilderness kind of period. I think it's carrying both of those concepts. We sing a song like that, don't we? Encamped along the hills of light, ye Christian soldiers rise. What's the next part?
Take the battle ere the night shall veil the glowing skies.
Yeah. Shall veil the glowing skies. Sing that song knowing that we're in a camp of saints together. And we're camped here, and we've got guards here. We've got 2 guards here at Manchester, 2 elders. And stay in the camp, because it's dangerous outside the camp. Don't go outside the camp. And we're not talking about a church building here. We're talking about in the relationship with these people here. This is the camp. And we've got leaders, and we've got guards, and this is where safety is. Don't let anybody deceive you that safety is somewhere else. Or else we're putting ourselves in danger of Satan getting us.
It's easy to lose hope when you're surrounded.
Yeah.
This is our little oasis.
That's right. The enemy is all around us, but we're here encamped together. And we'll make it through with Jesus and with each other. So whenever that time comes, God's going to deal with it. But again, just like the rest of the battle scenes throughout the book, what happens here? Here's this great battle. Satan's loosed, gathers everything together. It's just this big, mighty scene, and then what? Bam! Done. Gone. Fire is rained down, and they are just devoured. It wasn't a battle. What happens if you're outside the camp? That's where the fire came. It's in the camp of the saints is where you're safe. So God deals with Satan, and notice verse 11. Then I saw a great white throne and him who sat upon it, from whose presence earth and heaven fled away, and no place was found for them. And I saw the dead, the great and the small, standing before the throne, and books were opened, and another book was opened, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged from the things which are written in the books according to their deeds. And the sea gave up the dead which were in it, and death and Hades gave up the dead which were in them, and they were judged, every one of them, according to their deeds. Then death and Hades were thrown into the lake of fire. This is the second death, the lake of fire. And if anyone's name was not found written in the book of life, he was thrown into the lake of fire. I want to talk about the throne scene and all of that first, but in just a little bit. But I want us to make connection between the previous verses and what's going on here. When the beasts were destroyed and Satan was bound in verses 1 through 6, what were we told happened to the Christians who suffered and died during this period in verses 4 through 6? They were resurrected. They came to life. The Christians still living were able to see, no, these Christians aren't dead. They're with Jesus. They're alive. They are not dead. There is, and what did he call this in verses 4 through 6? The first resurrection. And over these what? The second death has no power. So now we're coming back to this language of the second death here. And who does, maybe I should say it this way, who does the second death have power over? The evil. Yeah, those that are outside, those whose names is not written in the book of life. That's who the second death. So blessed are those who take part in the first resurrection. When's the first time we're raised from the dead? Baptism. By faith in the powerful working of God. You're not just dunked underwater. And anybody that tries to boil it down, and let me just say this very specifically. Anybody that says this is an outward showing of an inward faith has misrepresented what Scripture says about baptism. Baptism says what happens when I am placed under water is I have faith in the powerful working of God. God works through my faith when I do that. And I am raised from the dead to newness of life.
The washing of regeneration and
The washing of a new spirit. That's the power of baptism. And let's be sure that when we talk about baptism and its importance, we don't boil it down as you need to do it because God said so. You need to do it because the power within baptism. Because God said so.
We're acknowledging the working of God. I mean, baptism is a work of God. I mean, I think we have unfortunately presented it sometimes as this is something you've got to do.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, we are involved in submitting us to this action, but this action is just not my action.
Right.
I am acting in this, behaving in this manner, submitting to God, allowing someone to put me under the water. I guess if there wasn't anybody, I could put myself under the water. But you know, This is God's power. And I don't know, people, we don't like to talk about miracles, but I like to think about it. It's a miraculous event.
It absolutely is a miracle.
God is taking
Yeah.
somebody that is guilty and sinful and red with bloodiness and unclean.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, that's not a miracle.
Yeah.
'Cause I can't do that on my own.
That's right.
So,
It's not natural, it's supernatural.
it's a
Right.
supernatural, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So we come to the end, where Satan is dealt with, and then everyone is going to experience this resurrection. There is the second resurrection that everyone, good and evil, will experience. The first resurrection is only for the faithful. The second resurrection is for everyone. Peggy?
Could you just shed some light on verse 11?
Yeah, so you see the throne, him who sat upon it, takes us back to the throne scene, from whose presence earth and heaven fled away, and no place was found for them. Is there like, just like, what does that mean? Or, yeah, I mean, I think you see a real strong parallel here to 2 Peter 3. It says, the day of the Lord, 2 Peter 3:10, the day of the Lord will come like a thief, in which the heavens will pass away with a roar, and the elements will be destroyed with intense heat, and the earth and its works will be burned up. Since all these things are to be destroyed in this way, what sort of people ought you to be in holy conduct and godliness? And then you notice he ends in verse 13, but according to his promise, we are looking for a new heavens and a new earth in which righteousness dwells. And what do you see in chapter 21:1? A new heaven and a new earth. So I think it's just a parallel of what you're seeing there. And we'll talk more about this fleeing away of heaven and earth next time.
Mine says that they shall find no place to hide.
Mm-hmm.
That made me think about in the judgment. He says they will all give an account.
Mm.
Nobody's going to miss this thing. Everybody is
Right.
going to be there.
Right,
And so you can't hide from God when it comes to this part,
right.
no matter how hard
Yeah,
you try.
yeah. All right, we'll finish chapter 20 and get into 21 on Wednesday.